I believe traditionally published books fare better for a few key reasons. First, authors have to establish an audience and proof of concept in order to even get a traditional deal. While this does put a hurdle in your path as an author, it also means that you have a way to reach readers directly, which would increase your book sales. It's pretty well known that not all books become bestsellers. Today, we're going to talk about why traditionally published books tend to sell more copies than independently published books. Note that for the sake of this podcast episode, I'm going to use independently published or indie as a stand-in for both self-published and hybrid published books. I am specifically choosing to do that for this episode because self-publishing and hybrid publishing models both have more in common with each other than either of these approaches has with traditional publishing, at least for what we're talking about today. Okay, let's dive in. Statistics show that most books sell less than 300 copies. Partly that's because of market saturation. There are over 3 million books published every year, which means there is a lot of options for readers to choose from. And that doesn't even count what we in the industry call backlist, which is any book that was published over a year ago. But let's jump back into new books. Out of the 3 million or so of new books published every year, roughly 2/3 are self-published, which means there are 2 million new independently published titles, mostly available through Amazon, because the big difference between indie publishing and traditional publishing is distribution, especially into physical bookstores, which includes chains like Barnes & Noble. But here's also where nuance is helpful in understanding the entire publishing landscape. Data suggests that most indie published books sell less than 250 copies, which, given that indie books make up the majority of books published, what that indicates is that the sheer existence of indie books not selling well overall factors into that overall number that we started with, where books sell less than 300 copies. Now, I've been throwing a lot of numbers around and it gets confusing fast, but shit is about to get crystal clear, y'all. We have much better data for traditionally published books than indie published books because traditional publishers are either publicly held companies that, share their earnings and share their financials, or are subsidiaries of conglomerates that have to do that. So we have public sales data. So out of that million or so new books that are traditionally published every year, approximately 1 in 15 sells more than 10,000 copies. I'm obviously biased, but I believe traditionally published books fare better for a few key reasons. First, authors have to establish an audience and proof of concept in order to even get a traditional deal. While this does put a hurdle in your path as an author, it also means that you have a way to reach readers directly, which would increase your book sales, especially when compared to someone who does not have that, who does not have an audience, does not have a proven methodology. That's pretty easy, right? If you come in with 1 million followers, you're probably going to sell more books than someone that only has 1,000 followers or even 10,000 followers. Another reason that traditionally published books fare better is that they're professionally produced. So issues like a fugly cover, cheap paper, lots of errors simply don't happen as much. Let's go to our favorite place, Tangent Town. Recently, I went on a girls' trip with 2 friends who love romantasy. One of my friends gave away a book she was reading, not because she didn't like it, not because she wasn't interested, but because it was so full of typos that she personally could not continue. But my other friend did not care. This is a great example of the difference that can exist both in quality and in the preference of readers. Personally, I know people who are bugged by any little typo or error in the books they read, whereas other people, including myself, often don't even notice. Okay, so let's go back to the main topic at hand today. Traditionally published books sell more copies because their authors have to have audiences and because they're professionally produced. But there's 2 more reasons that actually get overlooked a lot. And the big thing I like to harp on is distribution. By and large, most independently published books are not distributed to independent bookstores and large chain stores like Barnes & Noble. But traditionally published books are. And even though Amazon is the #1 seller of books in the United States, not being in those bookstores matters and probably impacts the sales of independently published books. And if you're the type of person like me who prefers to shop small and support local businesses, this is a great reason to opt into traditional publishing because, ironically, the traditional model does way more to support independent business than so-called indie authors. And lastly, the big thing that people underestimate is that within traditional publishing, there are more people invested in the success of the book than just the author. That includes literary agents, that includes collaborators like me, that includes the hundreds of people at a publishing house who do the work they do because they are readers themselves who love books. To sum this up, when you traditionally publish, research shows that you will sell more books. Your book sales will benefit because you have bigger distribution, more people that care, you have to have an audience to get that deal, and you're ready to sell your book. That said, the traditional route isn't for everyone. So if you want to know more about whether traditional book publishing is right for you, I've got a great episode on alignment for you back in the feed. It's episode 18. Go and find it. And I would love to hear what's on your mind when it comes to traditionally publishing your book. You can leave me a voicemail with your question and I can answer you in an upcoming podcast. The link to leave me a message is in the show notes. And as always, cheers to your success. Thanks for tuning into the Kind of Big Book Deal podcast. Want to see where you're at on your book journey? Check out my free quiz at meghanstevenson.com/quiz. That's MEGHANSTEVENSON.com/quiz. See you next time.